Welcome back. What a great opportunity for us today to speak to Herb London. He's the president of the London Center for Policy Research, and he's also a senior fellow at the Manhattan Institute and the author of Transformational Decade, a book that you may want to check out. Topic, and today we have a lot to talk with him about in a short amount of time. Hi, Herb. Nice to have you. What an honor, sir.
Thank you.
All right, you're concerned about ISIS and the fate of Western civilization, and it does seem that this radical group is bringing the world to its knees. How threatening is it from your perspective?
Well, it's threatening in the sense that it is a civilizational challenge, and we don't appear to be up to the task of competing against it. There's an awful lot that we can do that we're not now doing. I'm not suggesting that we send 250,000 troops into the Middle East, but clearly there's an air campaign that we can engage in that we are not engaged in at the moment. We send 7 or 8 sorties a day, half come back with their ordnance intact. So we're not very serious about fighting this war. It's also a long war. It's an ideational war in the sense that we are going to be fighting against an ideology. And we've got to resist the idea of simply thinking this is only ISIS. It's not ISIS. It's militant Islam. And we've got to be prepared to deal with this over the long term because we're going to be facing threats even if ISIS is defeated.
Seems like the United States is hiding, so to speak, or wants to be a part of a coalition, has refused to lead in this. How dangerous is that?
Well, I think that the world needs some sort of leadership. I mean, the obvious cliche that's often said is that, well, the United States should not be the world's policeman. Indeed, it should not be. But at the same time, we see what the world is like without a policeman. The world is in disarray. And so some kind of leadership is obviously required. You cannot lead from behind. That's an oxymoron. And so what you're looking for is some sort of diplomatic leadership that the United States is not now providing. In the Middle East, for example, the Peshmerga or the Kurds want to fight on our behalf. They're the boots on the ground. We have to provide them with modern weaponry so that they can fight against ISIS. They are not receiving it at the moment. We in Europe have to say to the Europeans, this is a crisis that you have got to identify. If the Europeans can't do it, then we've got to provide that kind of leadership, because that is the first barricade against any sort of threat that the United States will be facing. So we've got to understand that there are coalitions across the globe that are necessary to maintain equilibrium. The United States is not doing enough to maintain those coalitions.
I want to come back to the Kurds in a moment, but in the meantime, we have an administration that it seems to be on the appeasing side of all of this, especially with the proposed nuclear deal with Iran. Everybody sees the problems with it, but us. How dangerous is this?
Well, I think it's very dangerous because what it does is legitimates in Iran having nuclear weapons. Whether it's 8 years, 10 years, or they cheat and get it sooner, it remains to be seen whether, in fact, they will have nuclear weapons in the short term. But they will have nuclear weapons. The consequence of that is that you're already seeing that the Sunni nations are very disturbed. And it's also going to lead to the very proliferation that President Obama said he wanted to avoid. Egypt will get a nuclear weapon. Saudi Arabia will get a nuclear weapon. It's only a question of time. They're going to need a deterrent. And they're going to say, if you're going to allow Iran to have nuclear weapons, then we want to be in the same business. And so when Obama gave his Nobel Prize speech, you may recall he said at the time, we are going to prevent the spread of nuclear weapons. Proliferation is going to be the one concern that we will work against. Well, it's interesting that he has served as a catalyst for nuclear proliferation, in large part because of the Iran deal. And so it's a real irony, and a terrible irony, that the world is now facing proliferation at the very time the president said he wanted to avoid it.
I want to say this carefully and see if I'm saying it correctly. If radical Islam is the problem of the world, the global problem, and it's an ideology that cannot be tolerated, but it's hiding behind, quote, the word religion. Is that why we're not addressing this?
I think in part that is the issue. You remember, the president of Egypt said very recently when he went to Al-Azhar, this is the center of theological Islamic thought, he said at the time, we are very much concerned about the violence within our religion and that we've got to do something about it. And he used this expression, we need a revolution from within. It's obviously up to the Muslim faith to change that religion and deal with the violence that within it. It is interesting and I think very, very revealing that there has been almost no editorials about the speech that al-Sisi gave, that the President of the United States did not commend him. In my judgment, it's probably the most important speech given in the last 100 years, and yet it has received scant attention in the United States, which in itself is revealing. So there is an attempt to do something about the militant side of Islam, but we are not providing that leadership, nor are we giving the kind of attention to the statements that are made by the al-Sisis of the world, the King Bahrain's, the King of Bahrain, who made a very similar statement. We are not giving attention to it, and we should.
All right, so the 9/11s and the recent Paris attacks, how much more will the world tolerate before we push back?
Well, again, it's very difficult to say. A part of it is that there's a capitulationist attitude that exists in many capitals. But I think that the public is being very, very wary after 9/11, after the Paris attacks, and there will be other attacks. It's a question of lone wolves operating together with others, getting leadership from ISIS and from other groups in the Middle East, and we will be seeing other attacks. The danger, of course, is that what kind of response is appropriate. We have to understand and be very particular about the kind of response that we engage in, rather than getting trapped into some sort of nest of vipers where the United States has to deploy several 100,000 troops, which I do not think is appropriate. But there are strategies between conciliation and all-out war, and that is one of the choices, the kind of false choices that the president has provided. It's not a question of all-out war or conciliation. There are a lot of options in between. We've got to consider those options carefully.
All right, well, France, liberal France, after the terrorist attack in Paris, closed its borders. I mean, that's a huge change in thinking. Can we do the same? Can we begin to vet people? I realize we got a refugee problem, we got an immigration problem, but we also have porous borders. France has now closed their borders. It seems to me that was the appropriate response.
Well, I think you're going to see this across Europe. I mean, it's interesting that the most popular man in Europe is Viktor Orban, the president of Hungary, because he said, we are not going to accept refugees. There are too many dangers associated with the acceptance of these refugees who are coming across the Mediterranean. That's not the attitude in Germany, but it is the attitude in Hungary. At the moment, he has approval ratings of well over 80%. So he is an enormously popular man. The president of Poland has taken a very similar, made a very similar response, saying that Poland is not going to accept these refugees. In part, it's not a question of lacking compassion. It's a question of national security. And at some point, we're going to have to raise the same question here. If, in fact, there are sleepers who cross our porous border from Mexico or even from Canada, we've got to do something about it. We can't let the sleepers come into the United States and decide when they're going to pick up an AK-47 and start shooting Americans. This is intolerable. And so we're going to have to vet these people who come into our borders, close our borders, and be sure that when we open that door, we open the door to the appropriate people.
Do you think this could divide the EU, maybe even end it?
Well, I think that it's putting great strains on the EU. There is no question about it, because once you enter a European Union nation, you presumably, according to the Schengen Agreement, you're in the 1990s, you're allowed to move across any European state. Well, obviously, now you're going to see the rise of Westphalian attitudes, that is, nationalistic attitudes. People are going to say, look, that may be your policy in Germany. It's not the policy we want to observe in Hungary. It's not the policy we want to observe in Slovenia. So there are going to be great changes that occur, and there's unquestionably enormous amount of potential fragmentation that occurs as a consequence.
I'm going to have you back. I'm almost out of time, but one quick question, Herb, and that is, by the way, you can go to herblondon.org is his website if you want to connect with him, herblondon.org, and learn more about the London Center for Policy Research. Quickly, about 30 seconds, can we balance the true refugee from the being infiltrated with the terrorists? Can we vet that problem?
Well, if you're going to take in thousands of people, obviously the answer is you cannot vet the problem. So I think that we have to be selective about who we bring into the United States. And again, my argument about all of this is we want people who want to come to America, who want to be here, want to observe our Constitution, want to observe our laws, want to be a part of our constitutional framework. If they do believe that, then it seems to me that they are potential candidates for admission to this country. If they don't do that, they want Sharia to change America, then they don't belong here.
Herb, sorry, I'm going to get you back. Thank you for your time. Let's connect again soon, okay?
Pleasure to be with you. Thank you so much.
We'll see you next time on Focus Today.
Hi, I'm Paulina, and I work at theDove TV. Did you know that when you support theDove TV, you have a profound impact, not only in our community, but around the world? It's your continued support that takes the inspiration and hope in the programs we produce and makes them available to the thousands of people who are watching these videos online every week. Help bring encouragement and hope to our valley and beyond by making a secure online donation today at our website, thedove.us.